Listen Up with Jim Potts. Listen up, business owners, CFOs, human resource managers, and all managers and supervisors. Jim Potts is answering and addressing your questions and concerns, helping you stay out of court. Furthermore, please be advised that Jim's answers are not legal advice and are only intended as a guide based on his years of experience. The phone lines are open. 1-855-4-J-POTS. That's 1-855-457-6887. You can also email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Ready to listen up? Here is Jim Potts.
Jim Potts back on the air. Well, I got an email before I get into talking about some of the bills that are pending before Jerry Brown. At any rate, the email was basically, it's what it states, is that can my job force me to retire? This issue of forced retirement has come up before. It's a constant battle, quite frankly, and it borders on age discrimination, and that's the real issue. Can they force a person to retire? Well, the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Commission, is a federal agency, and they're very big on the issue of age discrimination, as they should be. Now, there was a recent situation where the EEOC has sued a hospital for age discrimination because it forced employees to resign because of their age. And the lawsuit basically claimed that hospital managers made certain comments, ages, they call them ageist requirements, about people's age, including that younger nurses could dance around the older nurses and that they preferred younger and fresher nurses. Now look, there's a difference, in my opinion, between age discrimination and a forced retirement situation. I mean, I know they all fit together, but the comments such as those, in my opinion, that's age discrimination. That's got nothing to do with necessarily forcing somebody out. You can't make comments like that. That's going to be pure and simple. It's going to be age discrimination. Now, there are certain industries that, in fact, they can do a forced retirement. You see it with law enforcement. You see it with the fire departments. You see it with airplane pilots. I think airplane pilots, they can become navigators afterwards. So that's like that third seat there, I guess, or whatever the case may be on the bigger flights. But not pilots after a certain age. Now, there are those companies out there that have 65 for high executive positions where they can try and get people to retire. And I guess the logic is that they're not as sharp as they were before. Well, there are people in that age group, I'm sure, that will take issue with that, because there are people out there that are much older than that are still very sharp, that are doing their jobs, etc. And quite frankly, I'm one of them. This business about getting over the big 6-0. Once you're over that, you're over the hill. These days do not appear to be, the right way anymore to go, because that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of baby boomers out there that are very sharp, that are still working in the work environments and are still very productive. So let me make that clear. But when you say, can my job force me to retire? This was sent by Joe. Actually, it's out of Wisconsin. But, Wisconsin may have their own rules and regulations. I don't know. But I can just tell you from a federal standpoint, the protected age group is 40 and above. So, Joe, it would depend upon the type of job that you're doing, which is not there. Do I think, generally speaking, a company should be able to force somebody to retire? I think the answer to that question is no. I tell, managers and supervisors in seminars all the time that it's never an age issue, it's a performance issue. It has nothing to do with somebody's age, whether or not they can perform or not. Now, granted, a guy in his 70s is not going to be able to probably go out possibly and work a full day construction, 5 days a week, from 6 a.m. until 4 p.m. in 90-degree weather. As maybe some of the younger guys with some of their stamina, yeah, they could handle that part. I mean, I do agree that there's certain jobs that that may be a little bit more, physically demanding. But generally speaking, I don't agree that there should be a forced retirement age in the private sector with employers. So, can they force you to retire, Joe? It depends upon the position that you're in. For those of you that are listening out there, I don't think that you should be forcing people to retire if they're working in an office environment, they're working at a restaurant, and things of that, manufacturing. I just don't think that this should just be a general blanket policy about forced retirement. I think the times are changing, and certainly if the times are changing, that threshold age where they're talking about the mandatory retirement, I think that would probably need a second look these days, because you've got people that are actually very productive that are working into their 70s and their 80s. So it's been told to me. Okay, I hope I answered your question, Joe, on that note. There's some bills that are pending out there that are going to create a little havoc. And the next time that I air the show, I will have some results from you. But one of my concerns is currently, it's called AB 2337. And that concern, quite frankly, is that California law prohibits employers with 25 or more employees from discriminating or retaliating against employees who take off for specified purposes related to being the victims of domestic violence, sexual assault. Is what it's going to do is actually amend the labor code section to require that employers provide written notice of these rights to all new hires and upon request to current employees. Now, again, the threshold for some of these numbers is dropping. This is 25 or more employees. Before, some of these laws were at, depending on the size you were, they were greater than that. Now they're actually lowering it a little bit more, which in my opinion could create problems for the smaller employers. Another one that's on the books here that needs to be discussed is SB 1063. And that is what that has to do with is expanding Equal Pay Act to preclude race and ethnic background based disparities in pay. Now, what happens is that this bill picks up where the Equal Pay Act, which prevented discrimination based on gender. Now, there are so many laws out there already on making sure that men and women are being paid fairly, that women are being paid fairly and as applied to what men are making. But now, this new law is going to create a new statutory prohibition under the labor code. And it's what it's going to do is provide more opportunities for litigation, because this is going to be based on race and ethnic background. So what they're saying is that if a person of color, I would say African American as an example, thinks that somebody Caucasian now is making more money than them, now it's going to open the door to them now arguing, why is Joe making more money to me? Now, I know for the non-management people out there, they're going to be saying, well, what's wrong with that? It's not so much what's wrong with that. It's going to open the door to litigation. That's, the floodgates, basically. And I think everybody should be paid. So let me just say that. And I think that it's always going to be discrimination, especially under the guidelines of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and under the Fair Employment and Housing Act in California, that everybody has to be paid the same, or it's going to be discrimination. I know they pointed out before they're always focusing on men and women, but I can tell you that I've handled situations where, in fact, the issue was somebody of an equal position was being paid some different monies. There's so many factors that go into why people pay people different money. Experience can be one. And employees always think that I'm not being paid enough. And why is somebody being paid more than me? This is just going to be another avenue for unnecessary litigation. And I know that people out there, they're going to look at that and think, why is this guy, saying that, people shouldn't make the same money. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it's so easy for somebody to be able to bring in a lawsuit based upon pay. It's ridiculous. And I agree the employer should be able to show logically why somebody I'll just use it. Somebody Caucasian versus somebody black. Why the Caucasian person may be making more money. There could be situations, by the way, where maybe there's a black person making more money. Now, for those of you who say, oh, yeah, it doesn't happen that way. It does happen that way. It can happen both ways. So I'm extremely concerned about that bill as well. I really think it's going to open up the floodgates. Another one that I'm concerned about is SB 1166, which has to do with parental leave. Now, this applies to California. And this bill would require all California employers with 10 or more employees, now hear me on this, 10 or more employees, to provide up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to an employee with at least 12 months of service and who has worked at least 1,250 hours in the last 12 months. Now look, before that was 50 employees. Now is what you're talking about is that it's dropping the number down to 10. So if I've got 10 employees and 3 of them go out on the FMLA, as an employer, I'm in trouble. Because, what am I going to be able to do now? And look, I understand about the rights of the employees. I understand about the unpaid leave. But there's even some things that are pending regarding, I think San Francisco is one of them, regarding the fact that anybody, the size of the employer, 10 or more, would have to pay for the 12-week leave of absence as well. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of strain on an employer who has a small number of employees. That's just too much. So, if you don't agree with any of those bills, please do me a favor. Call Jerry Brown's office up in Sacramento. Let him know you disagree with it, because he's got until September 30th to sign this. So therefore, when you hear the podcast, make sure you're calling his office to make sure that in fact, and call, fax, or whatever you have to do, because I know by the time you hear this, there's only going to be a few days left to the month, okay? But I do want to bring that to your attention. All right, with that last comment, it's time to close out the segment, but let me remind you that you can hear us on Facebook at Listen Up and subscribe to us on iTunes. Just look for Listen Up with Jim Potts. And as a reminder, we take calls every third Friday, 9:45 to 11:15, and we can be reached at 855-4J-POTS or 855-457-6887. Or you can email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Okay, I'm Jim Potts. I will continue to fight the fight. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being a part of Listen Up with Jim Potts. We take your calls every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for your questions and concerns. Call us at 1-855-4J-POTS. That's 1-855-4J-POTS. Again, that's every third Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time at 1-855-4J-POTS. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on iTunes, and link up with us on LinkedIn. You can also email us at listenup@jameswilliampottsllc.com. Until next time, make it a great week.